You are experiencing the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast.
It is May 25th, 2023, and welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty, where we are bringing you the people and the organizations who are fighting for liberty around the country and in your region. And today we have a special show. We are interviewing Chase Oliver. He is a candidate for the Libertarian Party's 2024 presidential nomination. He has also been a libertarian activist since 2010, an anti-war activist before that. And also, you may remember him as the guy who upset the apple cart in South Carolina.
No, in Georgia.
Georgia. Yeah. Or was it Georgia? Oh, it's Georgia. Sorry, Georgia. And so you remember better than I do. But anyway, it was Herschel Walker and Warnoff, and boy, it came down to the wire, and Chase was the difference maker in that one. So we'll be talking to him a little about that. But before we get into any of the other stuff, let me introduce you to the rest of our panel. In our lower left-hand corner, we have Leon, the word Brathwaite, last word in Liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. My name is Jason McPhee, and I'll be your host today. And we have Chase Oliver in the bottom right-hand corner. Chase, tell us, how did you come to running for the to activity in the Libertarian Party?
Yeah. So first, thanks for having me on. Let's tell you a little bit about my origin story, so to speak, how I became a libertarian. As you said there in the intro, I started out my political awareness as an anti-war activist. And that's because when I was in school, 9/11 happened and the war in Iraq got started. And so, I was an anti-war activist. I opposed the wars on its very face because especially the war in Iraq, as we know, was based on lies being told by the government. And I was tired of seeing people in my generation get sent there. So in that process, I guess because George Bush was a Republican, I kind of defaulted to the Democratic Party, even though I was very much a limited government Democrat, if those even exist. And then once Barack Obama got elected and did not do any of the things he promised when he said he was going to stop wars and close Guantanamo Bay, that made me walk away from the Democrats. And lo and behold, I found the Libertarian Party actually at the Atlanta Gay Pride Festival. You see the rainbow flag behind me there. In 2010, I was at the Atlanta Pride Festival, and the only political party that was there representing themselves was the Libertarian Party. And I met their candidate for governor, John Mons, and he let me know that the Libertarians are the true anti-war party in the United States. And I've been a hardcore libertarian ever since. I've jumped right into the party, into the philosophy, and now I've been blessed with being able to run for Congress. Last year, being able to run for U.S. Senate and causing that runoff that created national news for the Libertarian Party. And now I'm looking to keep on running for president so I can make national news for the Libertarian Party over and over again, not just in one state, but in all 50 states. So that's kind of what brought me here is my opposition to war. And then after becoming a libertarian, really, I got involved in things like justice reform and immigration reform issues that really made me a diehard libertarian.
So, Chase, if you are successful as president, what it is you plan to do differently?
Only than the two parties that currently exist. Well, first and foremost, I'm going to do everything I can as president to take power out of the hands of government structures and power structures and return that freedom and that power back to each and every individual. And that comes with cutting a lot of government. It comes with reforming a lot of what government does at its base level and bringing that back to localized, decentralized government. But at the end of the day, what would I do different than Republicans, Democrats? First things first, I would follow through on my promises. I would actually work towards the goals that I say I'm going to do and not compromise, which is what happens every Republican or a Democrat gets elected, or even a libertarian Republican gets in office. You very quickly see them compromising their values. If I'm elected president, you're going to have a libertarian president who will not be compromising and will be promoting freedom full bore for the entirety of the term.
That's interesting. You said that it was sort of the anti-war movement, and Barack Obama sort of disappointed you a little bit. Did you find that you kind of had an evolution that as you sort of, I guess, got cozy with the Libertarian Party? Did all your thinking evolve on a lot of topics?
Well, what's funny is even when I was a Democrat, like I said, I was kind of a limited government Democrat. I supported things like the fair tax, replaced, which is much better than what we currently have, where we're being taxed with the fruits of our labor. So even when I was a Democrat, I was very much like a small government Democrat, but I definitely issues as time has gone on. I've only become more and more of a minarchist as time has gone on. And it just seems that the longer I'm here in the liberty movement, the more closely I get to being minimalist of government, which is minarchist, where I'm at now. Not quite an anarchist, friends in the liberty movement, and I respect their position. And I hope they join me in cutting down government from where it is right now, which is far away even from minarchy.
Mm-hmm.
So would you, just for the sake of our audience, could you please explain what a minarchist is?
Yeah. So a minarchist is somebody who believes that you do need a minimal government structure to secure the liberty of each and every individual. Namely, we believe that you do have to have a standing sovereignty of the nation. You want to have a court system so that those who have differences can adjudicate in a court of law. And you want to, that base contract structure that secures property rights and all the other rights that allow us to live as free individuals. Any government beyond those structures which secure liberty really are in excess of what a minarchist would like to see. So you're talking a radically different government than we have now. And I would say even if I were elected president for 2 terms, the amount of government that we can cut in 8 years will still be far and away from what a minarchist kind of the ideal is. And so we have to remember that we're working towards that ideal while living in the free, the current world that we live in. But yeah, the ideal is to get government down to basically securing our sovereignty in our borders as a military from attack from outside of our borders, and to secure people's liberty and property through contract and the adjudication ability that we have through the courts. That's about it. I also call it the night watchman state. But yeah, it's about as close to anarchy as you can get while still having a government.
Well, James, let me call our invisible hand real quick. Can you pull up the visual? So yeah, here's Chase's webpage. And so this is where we can go if you want to find out more about Chase and some of the issues that he is standing for in this. And one of the things when you talk about minarchy that I kind of wanted to get to is, I guess, how would you strategize that? What would your strategy be? Because obviously we've got just this massive government, and you can't get rid of it all in one bite. So what would your priorities be, in headed towards this minarchy?
Yes. The way you do this actually, and you maintain popular support while you're doing it, is you find the most unpopular, redundant, wasteful spending that you can. And that's where you start, because once you start carving that back, and you see increased prosperity once you reduce government and give people back more of their tax money and more of their fruits of their labor, that becomes proof of concept. And then people are like, oh, wow, this is great. We got rid of all these redundant programs. What else can we cut? But you have to start cutting somewhere. And that's the problem with the two-party system. Even libertarians who claim to be wanting to cut government and be fiscally conservative, they never get around to cutting things. Their idea of cutting something is cutting the growth from 3% to 1%. And that's funky Washington, D.C. numbers. We have to be talking about actual strategic cuts that lower the overall size and footprint of what our government does. As we start peeling the layers away, again, that becomes proof of concept. I always say, people say, what's the first thing you want to cut? I say, let's cut the first department that was created in my lifetime. That's the Department of Homeland Security. Let's roll back that national security structure, that spying apparatus, that apparatus that seizes privacy away from each and every American, the department that was created in the fear that happened post 9/11. We're not in the post 9/11 world anymore. We're in a more rational thinking frame of mind. We can do away with the Department of Homeland Security and still maintain an extremely secure without it. Things like the TSA could immediately be abolished, and we'd be just as safe if airports provided their own security, and they'd probably do a better job, frankly, than what the TSA does. So, yeah, when it comes to cutting back, you just peel the onion layer by layer. And as you do it, people really like what you see.
I mean, I think going to the equivalent of a TSA that's privately run and operated, I think will be far more efficient. And I totally agree with that. But I want to ask you something more broadly than this, though. I think it's widely agreed that politics, as is practiced here in the United States, probably even in many parts of the world also, politics is the art of compromise. I think that is well-established principles, I guess, if you want to say. How you, as a libertarian, will prevent yourself from compromising your principles away in order to get things done?
Well, the great thing about if I were elected president is the president wields extreme amounts of ability using the bully pulpit and using the fact that they are head of the entire executive branch. And you have a lot of wiggle room there. And that is because the courts have granted the executive branch broad powers. And while I would not seek to use those to compromise liberty, I will absolutely use those broad powers to try to as broad and as bold movements towards liberty as possible. Like on day one, if I were to get elected, I will immediately deschedule cannabis with the stroke of a pen. And then I will encourage Congress to follow that up with legislation so that it becomes permanent. I would immediately start issuing pardons. On day one, Edward Snowden would be pardoned. Ross Ulbricht would be pardoned. Julian Assange would be pardoned. Anybody who's convicted federally of just simple possession of any kind of drug would be pardoned. And it's those kinds of bold steps that allow you to not compromise. It shows the Republicans and Democrats in Congress that you mean business. You also have to not be afraid to wield the veto pen. And even with a threat of an override, you as president have. If you want to override me, there's mechanisms for you to do that. But as president, I am not going to compromise the position here. And ultimately, you're either going to get work done or they're going to have to do work without the extreme ease of the president being able to sign legislation. It will halt a lot of what goes on. But really, when it comes to a lot of these things, like particularly like, say, immigration, while I believe in Ellis Island immigration, hey, you come here, are you sick? Are you wanted for murder somewhere? Are you going to do harm when you're here? No? Good. Come on in. That's literally what I believe our immigration policy should be. But anything that's going to get us working towards that simplified immigration system, as opposed to building walls or putting more border patrol on the border that's really ineffective, I'll work towards that. I won't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. But at the same time, I will never, ever stop reminding the American people of what the ideal is and that this isn't perfect. And there are times when you have to sign things that are not perfect, but you have to let the American people know this is not exactly how I would want it. And I want the Congress to think about how to improve this going forward. But anything that gets us more free over time, that's a win. Because right now we're moving in the wrong. Even if we can just halt the brakes and stop the movement towards tyranny and towards authoritarianism, that's a win. So any way we can turn the train around.
I really like let me jump in real quickly on one of the things I really liked that I heard you say was that the idea that you weren't going to let the perfect be the enemy of the good, and the idea of reaching people. One of the problems we have, it seems like, especially as libertarians, we realize so many people just don't have a clue about the benefits of letting people run their own lives. I mean, so many people have been sort of conditioned to think that government has to be in all these areas. And I think what I really like that I heard you say is that, you're going to tell people what the goal is, but then you're going to say, hey, we may have to compromise somewhere along the way in order to get there. But, so just curious, how will you, I guess, use the bully pulpit, I guess, to sort of educate people on the benefits of liberty, I guess, and smaller government?
Well, I'm going to go ahead and manifest right now that I get the nomination. And so the first use of the bully pulpit is actually by being the Libertarian candidate for president and injecting the ideas of liberty into the conversation. I tell people all the time, one of the things that contrasts me from some campaigns is I don't just talk about the negativity of the state. I talk about the broad prosperity that liberty brings. What is liberty going to give to you and your family if we open this stuff up, if we free up the world? Like, how much better is your life going to be on average? And so using the bully pulpit, we can go around the country and demonstrate in real time how much better freedom can be. It also allows you to go around the country and speak out against major injustices that maybe aren't needing federal need eyeballs on it. Like in Mississippi, where there's a great medical cannabis company. They've been zoned out of Gulfport, Mississippi, and they're right now having to sue so that they can open up a medical cannabis facility, and across the street, opiate pill mill. So it's like, these are the issues that you can go fight for and start speaking out about. Another big issue that I think we can use the bully pulpit on, and not necessarily legislation, is on harm reduction strategies for addiction. Helping people by providing Narcan, clean needles, these kinds of programs, and so that you create trust with those who are suffering addiction, so that way when they need help, they know who to reach out to and find. There's a great organization I reached out to in Oklahoma called Shred the Stigma, and it's headed by the guy who started the LP Sober Caucus. Those kinds of things that you can do with the bully pulpit that don't require taxation can really change the world. But we have to start injecting liberty into the conversation and push that Overton window. And that's what I want to do as our nominee, is really put liberty back on the conversation, where it hasn't been for the last 3 or 4 election cycles, certainly.
Mm-hmm.
Chase, if I can, I would just like to take a step back. So earlier on in our conversation, you mentioned the issue of sovereignty. I mean, our sovereignty involved borders, obviously. And then later on, you were talking about the issue of what you would like to see in terms of immigration, which raises the obvious question: what do you think about what's happening at our southern border right now?
Yeah, I think what's happening, the crisis that we're seeing at the southern border, is actually a result of too much government and too much intervention into what's going on. People and goods and labor and capital should be able to move across borders peacefully, peacefully being the key objective there. And that's what most people who are seeking to live a life here and work here are trying to do. And it's our complicated immigration system that is so complicated, so costly, so time consuming, that has people sides. If we could simplify the means for people to come here and work, people would access those avenues and those channels, especially if they don't have the fear that them and their family will be separated at the border and thrown in cages. If we try and compassion and empathy, they're more likely to work within a system that we've created. The added benefit of having a more open and honest immigration system is that people who are here without documentation currently will be able to step out of the shadow economy. Ask yourself this question: how many immigrant wives and how many immigrant children are being beaten because they fear domestic dispute because they know they might be deported? How many people are suffering because of conditions like that? How much labor is being exploited because they know they can't say, hey, I'm being paid to do nothing, or to do all this hard work, and basically I'm a slave. Deportation. If you open that immigration system up, you bring people out of the shadows. And that's what we need to do, is treat people with compassion. And we don't sacrifice the sovereignty of our nation by doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's one of the those bully pulpit items of trying to show people what it is that the damage that pushing an economy into a black market can do versus keeping everything out in the light. This idea of, essentially you give up on justice at that point, because who can go to the court if everybody is somehow tainted, I guess.
Yeah, exactly, and that just why we need to have a real reform there. And that's not even saying about the fact that many of these people are coming here due to the black market creation conditions created by our war on drugs. The fact that we have cartels who are flourishing south of the border, making money importing drugs because of that. We have a war on drugs, that we have the illegality of drugs that we do. And you're seeing the increased use of fentanyl now too. That is a result of our war on drugs. If we changed our approach to something like Portugal, where we decriminalize all drugs, create easy avenues for addiction therapy, you would see far less fentanyl coming into the border. You would see far more people reaching out when they are suffering from addiction. But we have to change the way we think about this stuff. And if we don't have a bold libertarian candidate injecting those ideas in the conversation, because the Republicans and Democrats aren't interested in solutions. They're interested in whatever they can do to keep the infighting going so they can keep prospering off of our misery. And that's really what the two-party system does, is they never find solutions. They only find problems, and they fundraise off the problems, and they never actually get around to solve it. Does away with their money.
Well, another question I had for you is, and this is, I think we've seen this, especially with Trump getting elected back in, the 2016 election, is that he wasn't really, he didn't really have an idea of how to put together a team. And I'm curious, what is your strategy going to be for putting together a team of people to help you govern?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I'm going to be looking within the talent in the liberty movement. Like, I'm not going to be just going to like Republican and Democratic insiders positions. There are great libertarian judges that we can nominate to the bench. There are great libertarian thinkers on foreign policy that we can put in the secretary, that we put in the State Department, that we can put in the Defense Department. There are wonderful libertarian entrepreneurs that I think would do great, say, in the Department of Commerce or in the Small Business Administration. And really, as I am putting my team together, is go ahead and reduce the size of your department and the scope of what you do. So let's go ahead and start doing that on day one. And let's start making the cuts where they need to be made and show what a libertarian government in action is. And so many times I will literally be nominating people to positions so that they can close them out within 6 months to a year and be done with it. So my team's going to be small. And I'm looking for people who are, let's say like a position like Attorney General, right? Usually they go for some Ivy League educated ex-prosecutor to be the top law enforcement officer in the country. I'm going to be looking to somebody who has worked as a public defender, who actually knows what it's like to be on the other side of the prosecutorial practice and understands what the defendants have to go through in this country, and who's actually going to respect their constitutional rights as well. So those are the kind of minds I'm going to be looking for. And of course, there's lots and lots of wonderful organizations and think tanks that have great people in them. And that goes from organizations that have been around for decades and decades, like folks like the Kochs and others, things like Cato, things like the Mises Institute, things like, you got groups like Students for Liberty and Americans for Liberty. That's where a lot of my young staffers are going to probably come from, is from fellows from those organizations. There's great PACs out there with wonderful thinkers and organizers, groups like America's First, America's Future, rather. America's First is like a MAGA thing, I think. No, America's Future.
It is.
So those are the organizations that I'm going to be looking to, is where we have the brightest folks who have not ingratiated themselves in the Washington machine so much, but also know what they're talking about. So we're going to have a very, just like the candidate, if I'm elected, young White House, because I do believe in accessing the power of millennials and Gen Z. I think the boomer mindset in Washington, D.C. has gotten us where we're at, and we need new thinkers. If you're going to have, I would be the youngest president ever if elected, just under 40 on election day, or on inauguration day, rather. And I would probably have the youngest cabinet in history, too.
Okay. That will be quite a feat. Yeah, I can see that. So, but Chase, you must realize that one of the things that you're going to face, and where you'll face great opposition to any agenda, will be being able to navigate the swamp as we know it as Washington, D.C. So do you ever think about that, and how you'll get around the much resistance to the shrinking of government, the shrinking of government is a necessary requirement for the expansion of liberty. Mm-hmm. Have you thought about how you're going to achieve this goal of expanding liberty and shrink government?
Let me tell you how I'll do it. I'll do what Donald Trump actually promised to do when he was show. I'm going to fire people. We're going to fire a lot of government workers. And I'm sorry, I'm going to be handing their pink slips, wishing them their best in their future endeavors, and they will find other jobs in the marketplace, because with a limited government will come increased prosperity and increased economy and economic output. So they'll be just fine. We will fire those government workers. And I'm sorry that government workers are going to be fired, but that's so that we can restart the economic engine that is the free market and get government out of the hands of those things. So how am I going to combat the swamp? I'm actually going to drain it by firing lots of people. And management. It's just like any business where there's so many middle managers that aren't really necessary for what we're doing. We'll get rid of a lot of those. And a lot of those people have been in doing what they've been doing for decades and decades. And a lot of those departments are completely redundant. They several departments all do the same thing. So I'm going to just start finding the fat and I'm going to cut it, man. And we're going to get rid of that stuff. And that's part of being a bold libertarian, right? Is like, again, I'm not compromising that stuff. If I'm president, I have the ability to go ahead and reduce the size of departments without congressional approval. They just authorize the amount of money we get. I don't have to spend all that money either. That's the other thing. We can just not run programs, let them enforce it, as Andrew Jackson said. That's the job of the executive branch, and I will not be at the head of a bloated government. I will be the head of a shrinking government that returns power back to people in the 4 or 8 years that I'm there if I'm elected.
Okay.
I have a question for you too on the your experience in Georgia running for the Senate there. What did you take away from that will help you in your run for the presidency?
Well, I took away a couple of things. First, you always have to touch base with media. Even since my Senate campaign, I have kept that up. I'm regularly sending things out to the media so they see me, so that they're visual. You have to be a visual libertarian. And then aside from like sending out press releases, you have to go out and do things. You have to knock on doors. You have to hold events in a way that is being seen. Too many of us, and I say this with all the love, libertarians, all the love out there, too many of us are perennially online and we're not outside touching grass and doing work. So here's the 3 things I'll tell every affiliate that will make you successful. Trying to finish up here. 1, get somebody who's going to be able to speak at a city council meeting with clarity and make them your speaker. Send them out every time to speak for the libertarians. 2, be the libertarian in the room, single issue coalitions that you can create those partnerships across the platform, across the spectrum. And 3, find good work to do in your community. Adopt a park, help elderly folks mow or rake their lawn. Good work so you can be seen as being visual libertarians. That's how we're going to break through. But yeah, and I know we're kind of heading up on here at the end of the time, and I want to say thanks for having me on, you guys.
Yeah. Well, one last thing I guess I wanted to ask you, is there any other thoughts you'd like to leave? And James, can you pull up his site again so people can find this? So it is votechaseoliver.com, and you can find out more about Chase. You can certainly see the issues that and learn more about. And by the way, we're going to interview Chase on another show shortly where we're going to get into a lot of these issues as well. But Chase, is there any last thoughts you'd like to share with the audience on the way out?
Become somebody who's on our mailing list so that you know what we're up to. And if you see us traveling across the country, say hello and let me know on a 3x freedom means to you. I'm collecting these cards so that we can send them off to an author. But really, I want folks to go to the website, see what you like, and join the movement so that we can fight the 2-party state together. And thanks for having me on, you guys.
Well, thank you, Chase. And like I said to our audience, thank you for being here as well. And if you like this interview, then check out our next interview that we're going to do with Chase, where we dive into the issues. Thanks again so much for joining us. And until next time, stay tuned and stay free.
Yes, indeed. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.